It was the middle of the night. Alison Botha, just 27 years old, had just survived a brutal assault. As the car carrying her attackers disappeared into the distance, Alison was left lying alone, bleeding and broken on the side of a deserted road. Her body bore the aftermath of a horrific act, dozens of wounds across her stomach and neck. At first, she thought about giving in. Maybe it would be easier to just lie still and let it end. But something deep inside refused to let go. That spark of survival, of wanting to live, was still there. Realizing her stomach was badly injured, she used her shirt as a makeshift bandage, trying desperately to hold herself together. Then, against all odds, she stood up and began to look for help. The moment she did, everything spun, her vision blurred. She raised a trembling hand to her neck, only to feel something terrifying. Her head wasn't where it was supposed to be. Her neck had been so badly damaged, it no longer supported her head like it should. Years earlier, in a completely different world, Alison had been born in Port Elizabeth, a peaceful coastal town on the southeastern edge of South Africa. Air there was calm, the beaches wide and quiet. Alison entered the world on September 22, 1967, cradled in the arms of her loving parents, Claire and Brian Botha. When she was 10, her parents separated. She remained in Port Elizabeth, growing up with her mother and brother. A bright and determined student, Alison quickly stood out among her peers. She eventually became head girl at the prestigious Collegiate High School for Girls, a title reserved for only the most accomplished students. After finishing high school, Alison spent a few years traveling. She explored new places, met new people, and embraced life with open arms. Eventually, she returned to South Africa and started working as an insurance broker. Her days were filled with optimism, laughter, and love shared between close friends and her family. But fate had other plans, and those plans came in the form of two men, Frans du Toit and Jens Kruger. Frans, 24 years old at the time, had a dark and troubling past. As a child, he once set fire to a school. As he grew older, his behavior escalated, especially towards women. He had been involved in numerous violent offenses, but repeatedly escaped serious punishment. Thanks to a flawed legal system, most of his crimes were met with light sentences, if any at all. Kruger, 23, came from a different kind of chaos. Unlike du Toit, whose father worked in law enforcement, Kruger's father was a career criminal who spent most of his life in prison. Where du Toit exuded confidence and charm, Kruger carried a deep sense of insecurity about his looks and intelligence. Years of being ignored and rejected by women left him bitter and angry. Both men felt like outcasts. Their distorted mindsets and callous disregard for others made them dangerous. They fed off each other's rage, drawn together by shared resentment and an unhealthy fascination with satanic beliefs. Together, they formed a deeply twisted bond, and tragically for Alison Botha, their path was about to cross hers. On December 18, 1994, Alison spent a warm, sunny day on the beach with friends in Port Elizabeth. It was the kind of perfect day that makes you feel alive. Later that evening, she invited everyone back to her flat for pizza and games. The apartment was filled with laughter and light. Eventually, one by one, her friends left until only one remained. He didn't have a car, and Alison, ever thoughtful, offered to give him a ride home. She didn't want him walking alone through the quiet neighborhood. It was around 3 a.m. when she returned to her apartment. The parking space she usually used was already taken, so she parked a bit farther down the street. As she leaned over the passenger seat to grab a clean laundry bag, something unexpected happened. Her driver's door suddenly flew open, and a warm breath hit her skin. A man stood there. In his hand was a knife, and he was pointing it straight at her. The man told Alison his name was Clinton, but later, investigators would identify him as Frans du Toit. He tried to calm her, saying he only needed her car. If she cooperated, he promised, no harm would come to her. Trembling, Alison handed over the keys. Her heart raced as she sat frozen, too terrified to speak, watching him climb into the driver's seat of her car. Soon, They stopped to pick up another man, Thunes Kruger. Then the two of them drove Alison far from the city, heading into the outskirts where the roads were empty and the night was pitch dark. As they drove deeper into isolation, Alison couldn't shake the unease she felt. There was something about Kruger's cold, distant stare that sent chills down her spine. Eventually, they reached a desolate area. It was there that the men revealed their true intentions. They bluntly stated what they planned to do, even asking if she intended to resist. The fear wrapped itself tightly around her, leaving no space for hope or choice. She quietly shook her head. The men dragged her out of the car and onto the rough ground. Sharp debris, dirt, and trash scraped against her skin. Franz, the one who had first confronted her, was the first to assault her. When he was done, he handed her over to Kruger, and after both had inflicted their harm, they made a chilling decision. Alison had seen too much. They didn't plan to let her leave. Their first method was suffocation. One of them wrapped his hands tightly around Alison's neck. Her body reacted instinctively, and in the chaos, something happened that she might have felt ashamed of under normal circumstances. But that unexpected reaction may have actually saved her life. Still, her body went limp. She slipped into unconsciousness, but she was still alive. The attackers weren't convinced, believing she might survive. They chose a more violent way to finish what they started. They took out a knife. Alison was stabbed repeatedly 37 times in her abdomen, and then, in a final attempt to ensure she would never get up again, they struck her 17 more times in the neck. In the haze of fading consciousness, Alison caught a glimpse of movement, just a shadowy arm swaying in front of her face. Along with it came a strange, wet sound. Later, she would realize that what she had heard was the sound of her own skin being harmed. She remembered it vividly. All I could see was an arm moving in front of my face. His movement made a sound, a wet sound. He was working on my neck. I didn't feel pain, but it wasn't a dream. One of the men asked, "Is she gone?" The other replied, "No one can survive that," believing Alison was dead. Franz du Toit and Thunes Kruger climbed into her car. They drove off talking casually, fully convinced they'd gotten away with everything. They thought they had erased every trace of their crime, but in their arrogance, they made two critical mistakes. They had used their real names, and they left Alison behind. Back at the scene, Alison lay motionless on the ground, her body broken and battered, and yet, somehow, she was still alive, though she knew she was. At death's door, something inside her refused to let go. She had something she needed to do. With trembling fingers, Alison began to write in the dirt beside her. She scratched out two names, Franz and Thunes. Beneath them, she added a final message, "Love you, Mom." Though she was slipping away, Alison wasn't ready to give up. Then off in the distance, she spotted it. Headlights. There was a road nearby, and if she could just reach it, maybe, just maybe, someone would find her. Summoning every ounce of strength left in her body, Alison began to move. Every motion sent waves of pain through her, but she kept going. She knew her injuries were severe. Her abdomen had been torn open, and somehow, she was still conscious. As she dragged herself forward, she noticed a black shirt lying nearby. Desperate, she wrapped it around her waist to keep her insides from falling out. With one hand holding the makeshift bandage and the other clawing at the dirt, she kept moving 1 inch at a time toward the faint light ahead. At first, Alison tried to crawl, but it was painfully slow. Realizing she wouldn't get far like that, she made a bold decision to stand up and walk. But the moment she lifted herself off the ground, her head tilted backward, her vision blurred. The deep wounds to her neck had left her unable to fully support her own head. Still, she kept going. One hand held her injured abdomen, while the other steadied her head, preventing it from falling too far back. Later, she would recall, "I pulled my head forward with my hand, and my vision came back. By some miracle, luck finally found her, exhausted after everything she had Endured, Alison still had the clarity to choose a visible spot right in the middle of the road, on the white line. That way, someone driving by would be sure to see her. She collapsed. Asterisk, she vaguely remembered seeing a car slow down and then speed away, frightened by the sight of her injured, exposed body. But then another vehicle came. Inside was a group of young friends from Johannesburg on vacation. One of them was Tian Ellers, a veterinary student, shocked by the horrifying scene in front of them. The group immediately stopped to help. Tian jumped out of the car and gently grabbed Alison's trembling hand to comfort her. She couldn't speak, but she was still aware. Using his veterinary knowledge, Tian quickly assessed her condition. He removed his own shirt and pressed it to her neck to stop the bleeding. To keep her conscious, he asked her simple yes or no questions. Alison responded the only way she could, squeezing his hand once for yes, twice for no. Years later, Tan would reflect, "God put me on that road for a reason." That night, for reasons even he couldn't explain, Tan stayed by Alison's side for 45 minutes, holding her hand, talking to her, keeping her calm till the ambulance arrived. The road should have only taken 15 minutes to drive, but for some reason, it took 3 times that long. When the paramedics arrived, the look on their faces said it all. No one expected Alison to be alive as they lifted her into the ambulance. She refused to let go of Tian's hand, so he rode with her all the way to the hospital. What they found shocked even the most experienced professionals. Dr. Alexander Anelos, the surgeon who treated her, would later say he'd never seen injuries that severe in all his 16 years of practice, and yet miraculously none of the more than 50 stab wounds had hit any major organs or arteries. Alison's abdomen had been empty before the attack, which prevented a life-threatening infection called sepsis, and though her wounds had been exposed to dirt and debris, she showed no signs of infection. Against every expectation, Alison survived a 3-hour emergency surgery. Because of the severe wounds to her throat, Alison had to breathe through a tracheostomy tube. She couldn't speak, but her mind was clear. And when investigators brought her photographs of possible suspects, she had no hesitation. She recognized them instantly. Alison remembered everything, every detail of the attack. Her memory was so sharp, it played a crucial role in helping police identify and capture both Franz du Toit and Theuns Kruger. Both had long criminal records. Their arrests came quickly, the very next day. Police tracked them down and brought them in for a direct lineup. But for Alison's safety, authorities used a one-way mirror, the first time that technology had ever been used in South Africa. From her side of the glass, she watched as the men were paraded in front of her. Even though they had altered their appearance, Alison had no trouble identifying them. Both men were charged with a long list of crimes: kidnapping, assault, sexual violence, and attempted murder. During questioning, Du Toit initially thought he was being interrogated about a homicide. When officers informed him that Alison had survived, he seemed shocked and confessed immediately. He even handed over a ring that had belonged to her. What happened next was strange. Du Toit suddenly claimed he was possessed and asked for an exorcism. To everyone's surprise, the authorities agreed. A clergyman was brought in to perform the ritual, but even spiritual rituals couldn't save them from what was coming. On June 12, 1995, the trial of Franz du Toit and Theuns Kruger began. The details of the case were so disturbing that one of the defense attorneys actually withdrew, citing moral and ethical concerns. Alison, despite everything she had endured, took the stand. She faced her attackers and testified against them. And she wasn't the only one. Another young woman, a student who had been assaulted by Du Toit, also came forward, and so did a pregnant woman, someone who had been attacked by both men just weeks before the incident with Alison. The two criminals had threatened all their victims, warning them not to speak to the police. But that pregnant woman, terrified yet brave, did the opposite. She reported the crime the moment she was free. That one act of courage may have changed everything. And it may have been the reason Du Toit and Kruger later decided they couldn't leave future victims alive. Tragically, after being caught for the assault on the pregnant woman, both men were released far too soon. The justice system failed to keep them off the streets, but not everyone would become their victim. One woman who later testified at their trial came terrifyingly close to becoming another name on their list. Around the time Alison was attacked, she noticed two men watching her as she parked her car late at night. Her instincts kicked in. She quickly locked her doors and drove away. That small, quick decision may have saved her life. Months later, as news of Alison's case spread across South Africa, that woman saw their faces again. And she realized chillingly that the men who had stalked her that night were none other than Frans Du Toit and Jens Kruger. With overwhelming evidence, emotional testimony from Alison, and the brave accounts of other women who had survived, the court had little doubt. On August 7, 1995, the verdict was announced. Frans Du Toit and Jens Kruger were found guilty on all counts, every violent, horrifying act they had committed. In delivering the sentence, Judge Chris Janssen didn't hold back. He spoke firmly about the sheer cruelty of their crimes. Frans Du Toit received 3 life sentences. Jens Kruger was sentenced to 1 life term, plus an additional 25 years. Justice finally had been served. Judge Chris Janssen made one thing very clear as he handed down the sentence. Let me be absolutely clear. These men are a threat to society, and they must never be released. But there was a catch. According to South African law, any prisoner convicted before October 2004 would eventually become eligible for parole. The news sent waves of anxiety through the public. As for Alison, the aftermath of the trial brought an emotional crash. After surviving the unthinkable, it was only natural that she fell into a deep depression. But then, a light appeared. She reconnected with an old friend, someone who had also experienced trauma. Their bond grew stronger, and love followed. In February 1997, Alison married him. Together, they built a new life and welcomed 2 sons into the world. The impact of Alison's survival didn't just change her, it also changed Tiaan Ellers, the young man who had stayed by her side that night. Meeting her that day changed the course of his life. Tiaan realized his true calling wasn't in animal care, but in helping people. He left veterinary school behind and chose a career in medicine. He and Alison remained close, and Tiaan was even present to assist during the birth of one of her sons. That terrible night in 1994 became the beginning of something greater. In 1998, Alison published a memoir titled, I Have Life. The book told her story of survival in her own words, and it quickly became an international bestseller. It was translated into 7 languages and found readers all over the world. But Alison didn't stop there. She became a renowned motivational speaker, traveling the globe to share her journey and empower survivors of trauma. Her courage inspired thousands. Years later, Alison was approached by a filmmaker interested in bringing her story to the screen. The director, Uga Carlini, had been deeply moved after hearing one of Alison's talks. They agreed to collaborate on a feature-length film, but during production, something unexpected happened. Frans Du Toit, from behind bars, somehow managed to get in touch with Uga Carlini using a guard's cell phone. Even after everything, he had the audacity to ask for an interview, but that wasn't all. Du Toit said he would only speak on one condition: if Alison wrote and signed a letter forgiving him, and shockingly, if he received a share of the profits from her book and speaking engagements. Frans Du Toit tried to justify himself. If it weren't for me, she wouldn't have a story to tell, he said. The request was outrageous and was immediately denied. The film went ahead without him. In 2016, the story of Alison's survival made it to the screen. The film became the first in South African cinema history to be selected for the Dance with Films Festival in Los Angeles. That same year, Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University honored Alison with the prestigious Council Award, recognizing her remarkable contributions to empowering communities and inspiring resilience through adversity. As for the two men who tried to destroy her life, Frans du Toit is currently serving his sentence at Groupvling Maximum Security Prison in South Africa's Free State Province, a facility reserved for the most dangerous offenders. Vunes Kruger is held at C-Max Prison in Pretoria, one of the highest security prisons in the country, specifically designed for violent and high-risk inmates. The prison's architecture is intended to prevent any chance of escape and to maintain the strictest level of control. As of 2023, neither man has been granted parole. Both continue to serve their sentences for the crimes that shocked a nation. But the real story, the one that matters most, is not about them. It's about Alison Botha. Her case remains a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit, the unwavering will to live, to speak out, and to heal. Alison's journey is more than just survival. It's a story about courage, about rising from the ashes, and about finding light in the deepest darkness. What happened to her was horrifying, but what she chose to do afterward, that's what makes her unforgettable. She turned her pain into purpose. She became a global symbol of hope, inspiring millions around the world to never give up. Her story urges all of us to value life, to fight for justice, and to hold on to hope even in the darkest moments.